All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the noon briefing. Let me start with an update on the SG's travel. Just a few moments ago at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, the Secretary General spoke at the launch of the report of the high-level expert group on net zero commitment of non-state actors. You will remember that the Secretary General announced the establishment of the group during last year's COP. Today's report proposes recommendations to businesses, financial institutions, cities, and regions so they can ensure high, credible, and accountable net zero pledges. The report focuses on 4 key areas: environmental integrity, credibility, accountability, and the role of governments. In his response to the report, the Secretary General was very clear. Let's tell it like it is, he said, using bogus net zero pledges to cover up massive fossil fuel expansion is reprehensible. This toxic cover-up could push our world over the climate cliff. The sham must end, he said. He called on all non-state actors to review their pledges and align them with his and the report's guidelines. He also called on leaders to provide non-state entities with a level playing field to transition to a just net zero future. Those remarks have been shared with you. And also earlier today, the Secretary General also spoke at the event on accelerating adaptation in Africa, and he met with regional groupings and leaders on the sidelines of the conference. Tomorrow, he will take part in the launch of the former U.S. Vice President Al Gore's Climate Trace Initiative, and he will also meet with his youth advisory group and other young activists. Moving on to Ukraine, Denise Brown, the resident and humanitarian coordinator there, was in the city of Zaporizhia today, where she heard the stories of people whose lives have been torn apart by the war and have seen how humanitarians are working tirelessly to help them. Zaporizhia, which has been targeted several times in recent weeks with missile strikes, is now home to 160,000 people who fled from other parts of the country. Today, Ms. Brown visited a center established by authorities of the city of Melitopol, currently under the control of Russian forces, to help people who fled that city. Ms. Brown said that in this center, the UN, the humanitarian community, authorities, and volunteers have come together, and they are doing remarkable work to provide the Melitopol people with the support they need. Every day at this center, more than 200 people receive essential services and supplies. On Kherson, our humanitarian colleagues say they continue to receive reports of attacks impacting civilian infrastructure, adding to an already complex situation on the ground. Yesterday, for example, a school was destroyed in Zoloto Balka village. The UN and our partners are working to support people in the areas we can access, which are the ones under the control of the Ukrainian government. In the past 8 months, we have reached nearly 100,000 people with critical assistance in the Kherson region, with most of them having received cash assistance. Last month, the World Food Programme and its partners distributed food to 57,000 people in retaken areas of Kherson. And just a few days ago, UNICEF delivered nearly 30 generators to clinics and pumping stations. This will ensure that medical facilities in the towns that are back under Ukraine's control can have electricity, and that water and heating systems serving over 12,000 people will be up and running again. Our work to support people in the Kherson region will continue in the days ahead. To Haiti now, where our UN colleagues and partners continue to scale up the response to the cholera outbreak, which, as you know, as we mentioned a few days ago, has now spread beyond the metropolitan area of the capital, Port-au-Prince. The UN's Pan-American Health Organization, PAHO, continues to support the Ministry of Health in epidemiological surveillance. It is also procuring and distributing medical equipment and therapeutics to the 20 cholera centers that operate throughout the country. UNICEF and PAHO have recently been supported by the USAID, which has transported approximately 14 metric tons of critical supplies from Panama City and Panama, obviously, to Port-au-Prince to be used by PAHO and UNICEF in their cholera response. Also, since mid-September, the World World Food Program has reached over 71,000 people with different types of assistance, distributing close to $600,000 in cash and also 530 metric tons of food. Over 43,000 hot meals have also been delivered to internally displaced people who are hosted in sites as well as in cholera treatment centers in Port-au-Prince. Meanwhile, the World Food Program has supported 24 of its partners with fuel, and the Air Humanitarian Service, UNHAS, has undertaken over 200 flights as part of the response efforts. On Syria, now, senior UN officials in the region have expressed their deep concern over the escalation of hostilities in the country's northwest. Muhannad Hadi, the regional humanitarian coordinator for the Syria crisis, Ayman Garaebe, the director of the UN Refugee Agency's Middle East and North Africa Bureau, and Sudipto Mukherjee, the acting UN resident and humanitarian coordinator in Syria, they have issued a joint statement on this topic yesterday. They say that shelling, airstrikes, and clashes were reported in the vicinity of Idlib city, causing fires and destroying tents and homes of hundreds of displaced families in 3 camps supported by humanitarian organizations. Reports indicate that at least 9 civilians were killed, including 4 children, and 75 civilians were injured. At least 400 families have reportedly been displaced and 60 shelters were completely destroyed. These incidents are just the latest of the hostilities in northwest Syria. At least 121 civilians have been killed and at least 210 others have been injured this year, according to the UN Human Rights Office. All parties to the conflict must take constant care to spare civilians and civilian objects in accordance with international humanitarian law. Humanitarian conditions continue to decline in northwest Syria due to the ongoing hostilities and a deepening economic crisis. Today, 4.1 million people, 80% of them women and children, rely on UN assistance to meet their most basic need. Cross-border assistance remains an indispensable part of the operation by the UN and our partners to reach all people in need. The Secretary General, in his most recent report last month, expressed hope that the Security Council will find a consensus to prolong the cross-border mechanism in January of next year. Now, moving on to Sri Lanka, our UN team there, led by resident coordinator Hannah Singer-Hamdi, has revised its humanitarian needs and priorities plan. This plan now aims to help 3.4 million people and continues through this December. Since June, the plan has been responding to the government's request for UN-backed support for Sri Lanka amid its worst socioeconomic crisis since independence. Donor support has helped the humanitarian community reach more than 1 million people over the past couple of months with cash, food, school meals, medicine protection, and livelihood support. While we and our partners have raised around $78 million so far to tackle the needs, the revamped plan now needs nearly $150 million. The plan's revised targets include immediate food assistance for 2.4 million vulnerable and food insecure people, as well as support for 1.5 million people who work in agriculture and fishing to revive food systems that have been severely disrupted. The resident coordinator stresses that safeguarding livelihoods is safeguarding lives. She thanked the international community and called on continuous support to address the pressing needs of the Sri Lankan people. And finally, a note of a completely different kind for you. Last night, the United Nations received the Environmental Sustainability Award at the Council of Fashion Designers of America. It was yesterday the 2022 Fashion Awards there. The Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohamed, accepted the prestigious award on the UN's behalf. And that is it for me. I will take your questions now. Celia, go ahead.
So I'm going to ask you again what I asked yesterday already, because today someone named Allah Abdel Fattah, a political prisoner, has ceased to eat and drink,
Yeah.
and he's on the way to die. He's a political prisoner. So did the Secretary General talk to Sisi about those people who are jailed with no political process or whatever? Did he talk? Did he ask for those people to be released?
Very short answer to this, yes.
Did?
Yeah,
And? Because that one is still in jail.
this issue was raised. And you also have seen, I'm assuming this morning, that the High Commissioner for Human Rights also issued a statement on this exact topic, calling for the release of Allah Abdel Fattah. Yeah. Yes.
Just to be very specific, he specifically asked for him to be released, that pro-democracy campaigner who's been in jail for 10 years. His name was mentioned in the interaction. And was that in a meeting with President Sisi?
It was in let's call that an encounter that they had yesterday. That's what I referred to yesterday, the encounter they have, and I have confirmation that
And will he continue to raise it during his time in Egypt, given that Volker Turk, the High Commissioner, says he's at acute risk of imminent death? Yeah, okay. Can I ask then about something else, which is the US Ambassador, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, is in Ukraine. She's meeting President Zelensky. Both of them have been talking about the Black Sea Grain Initiative. President Zelensky talking about new ports being included in the deal and talking about why it was important that it was extended. What is the latest from the UN side? And is the Secretary General in any of his other meetings? I mean, he's focusing on climate, but clearly he may well see other leaders from other countries. Will he be raising this issue? And that gets me to my last point. Can you update us on what other bilaterals he's had?
Excellent. I don't have a very fresh update on negotiations linked to the Black Sea Grain Initiative. As I said yesterday, as we've said so many times since the beginning of these discussions, discreet diplomacy is really key right now, but you can be assured that everyone is determined to see this file moving forward and to see positive outcome on all the issues linked to the Black Sea Grain Initiative, and also on the other side on the agreement linked to the Russians, grain fertilizers and foods. So negotiations are ongoing. On the Secretary General's bilats in Egypt, I can tell you that, so we mentioned yesterday, and you had the SG himself in his remarks talking about the bilat he's had with the Prime Minister of Pakistan today. So he has had a number of bilateral meetings with several leaders, including the new Prime Minister of Italy, the President of Austria. He's met also with the President of Tajikistan, also with the Special Envoy for Climate of China, and also other meetings. Edie.
Following up on James's question on the Black Sea Grain Initiative, there's been a very significant slowdown in the number of ships getting through. I think it's now down to 9 to 12, when actually, when the Russians were out of it, they processed something like 46. Does the Secretary General have a comment about this slowdown, which is significantly impeding the quantity of grain being shipped?
You see, as you ask your question, I'm just looking at the latest update we got from the Joint Coordination Center. I expect that we'll have another update today, and I know that they're working very hard to get as many ships moving. Yesterday, the last we heard, so they concluded 10 inspections yesterday, and indeed, yeah, there are vessels waiting to move into Ukrainian ports, and they said that they were planning to deploy 4 joint inspection teams today. So we'll have another update from them, from their efforts.
Can you
but-
get a comment from the Secretary General on the importance or the need to speed this up?
I can get that for you. Yes. Daisy.
Yeah,
go ahead,
I
Edie.
had two
Yeah.
other questions. First, on Haiti,
Yes.
has the Secretary General received any update on the need to get some kind of security assistance into Haiti soon?
So what we understand is that negotiations between member states on this topic are ongoing. I don't have a new update from the Secretary General's perspective to share on this, but I know that negotiations are ongoing.
And in light of Elon Musk's latest comments about Twitter and his urging voters to vote in a particular way, does the United Nations have any updated comment on its association with Twitter?
So we all remember what Stefan said on this topic on Friday. On our side at this point, we're still monitoring developments. We're still in touch with Twitter. So no, nothing new on this side, but we're still monitoring developments. Yes, Daisy.
I have asked this question, I believe, since months ago, and last time I asked this question to Farhan 3 weeks ago. Concerning Olivka fact-finding missions, is there any update, or it's just installment?
No update.
So what happened in the past 3 weeks?
I think that, work continues, but I don't have a fresh
So the
update
United
to give
Nations
you.
is
I
still
feel, I
working
feel
on
bad.
that.
I don't have a better update to give
Okay,
you
so
than
it's
what Farhan told you last
the
time.
United Nations is still working on that, right?
Yes.
Okay, so my second question, yesterday the Ethiopian government and Tigray forces, they decided to establish a telephone hotline to maintain the truce, which struck last week. Do you think this is in the right direction, and how could this help the humanitarian situation in Tigray area?
So we know that negotiations are ongoing right now. And at this point, on our side, we're continuing our humanitarian, us and our humanitarian partners are continuing discussions on resuming aid and also personnel convoys into Tigray with the relevant sides. And, the humanitarian colleagues are all mobilized to provide food, nutrition, health, and water treatment supplies once the approval to go ahead is granted. And in the meantime, our humanitarian colleagues are telling us that humanitarian access across northern Ethiopia has improved due to the cessation of hostilities. And, we had an update on that, I think, on Friday. So I can just reconfirm that our partners, they have started to provide assistance to people. But of course, we're, as I just said, we're ready to provide more because we know that the needs there are immense.
And one last question, if I may. The French magazine called Le Canard Enchaîné, if I pronounce it correctly.
I'm not sure I understood that.
Okay, they published a caricature here concerning
What is
the
this?
World Cup issue. In this caricature, they have like several males wearing, bearded male wearing the shirts saying Qatar and holding guns and rifles and some of them daggers. This one has already drawn criticism from many, Arabic countries and the people from the region. Does the UN think this is a freedom of speech, or do you think this is racism which should be condemned?
I had not seen this. I understand. Le Canard Enchaîné. I can look. Let me look into this properly. I'll get back to you on this. All right, go ahead.
Gregory Sapornikov, TASS News Agency. If you let me, two questions, please. First, on the margins of climate conference, the president of Sri Lanka called the Secretary General to convey the world's agriculture ministers to discuss the food security. So, do you have any reaction from the Secretary General?
On the Sri Lanka,
Yes.
you say, tell me again.
The President of Sri Lanka
Okay.
called the Secretary General to convey the meeting of the world's agriculture ministers to discuss food security. So, do you have any reaction from the Secretary General on that proposal?
Let me get back to you on this because I don't have any notes on that call.
And the second
Yeah.
one, please. The Russian company Uralchem said earlier that it will send a first vessel with Russian fertilizer to Malawi in the first week of November, as earlier announced Rebecca Greenspan. So, do you have any updates? Has this vessel already arrived? If not, do you have any particular dates? And is the UN waiting for another vessels with Russian food and fertilizer will come to the developing countries? Thank you.
Okay, well noted. Let me double check on that vessel. I'll get some more information and I'll get back to you on the exact status because I don't have the details with me right now. Yes, Dulcie.
The announcement about the UN in, did you say Melitopol?
Melitopol.
Melitopol. So that's under Russian control?
It's let me just go back to the note where. So the Melitopol is. So she it's in Zaporizhia that she
It's in
visited the
Zaporizhia.
center established by the authorities of the city of Melitopol that is receiving people who have fled that city.
So is that the first visit by the UN in the Russian-controlled areas of Ukraine?
She was in Zaporizhia. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So does that represent the first foray of the UN humanitarian aid people in crossing the front lines?
Let me check on that
Okay.
to be sure, because I believe that I'll check with you. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just also wanted to ask about Guterres's informal conversation with Sisi. Maybe you don't know specifically where it took place, but there are several pictures on the COP27 website showing the two of them sitting together actually in the big auditorium. They don't look like they've had a really friendly conversation, but did that take place at that point?
What I've been told is that it was an informal encounter where they had time to talk. Yes, Stefano.
I don't know. It's working? Yeah. Yesterday, I asked you about if the Secretary General has spoken with the Italian government about the migrants rescue situation. Now, you answered to say that practically the Secretary General agrees with what the UNHCR and other UN agency have been saying about the situation. Now, how you mentioned the Secretary General met for the first time the new Italian Prime Minister yesterday. For what we know, they spoke about environment, they spoke about Ukraine, and they spoke about Libya, situation in Libya. There is no mention of speaking on the issue about the migrants. So, asking again, did the Secretary General spoke with Meloni about the crisis in this moment in the Mediterranean concerning migrants?
So what I have for you is that they discussed several topics, including Ukraine, the energy crisis, climate. I don't have a specific note on your question, but I would not be surprised. But I can check to really be certain whether or not this happened. Let me go then online. I have Maggie, I believe.
Stephanie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Maggie.
Great, thanks. A couple of weeks ago, a Pakistani journalist, Arshad Sharif, was shot dead in a car near Nairobi in Kenya. And Reporters Without Borders is calling for the United Nations to investigate his death. Do you have any reaction, plans, comments on this?
I think Stefan responded to questions linked to this a few days ago. I don't have any update today on this situation, unfortunately, Maggie. All right,
Okay.
so do we have, yes, James?
Okay. First one concerning the death of the peacekeepers in Kar, the Bangladesh peacekeepers. There seems to be a dispute over exactly what happened between the UN and the Russian Federation. The Russians are saying that Russian instructors provided emergency medical assistance. And then they say, we're appalled that MINUSCA is denying this fact. We resent the double standards by the UN Secretariat. Safety and security of peacekeepers is not a bargaining chip in political games. We request an investigation and refutation of previous statement by MINUSCA in this regard. What's the UN's reaction to that statement from the Russian Federation, and what actually happened?
I actually have not seen that statement. I will reach out to my peacekeeping colleagues to get more information for you on this.
Okay, and before I ask my next question, I won't ask a question about it. I will note the escalator is still not working. Yesterday, Batul got a little bit better than I did from you with regard to the Wi-Fi in Sharm el-Sheikh and also the app. And you did say that you would, because the UN has been planning this for a long time. There are UN staff who've been based there planning this. I mean, the idea that they didn't test the Wi-Fi and made sure it wasn't being censored, it seems daft. You said you'd reach out to the UN FCCC. I wondered if you have anything back from them.
Yeah, they're aware of the issue. That's the update I got from them, and I'll refer you to them for more on this. All right. Any more questions? Thank you so much, everybody. So, Paulina, your turn.